Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Devine.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Bill Devine, and I represent AT&T. Let me start by saying thank you for including us in this morning's hearing. I'd also like to say I'm very encouraged by the earlier panel's conversations about broadband, because we at AT&T, and I think all the companies before you today, are in the broadband business. We are in the business of building and selling broadband services to California consumers and consumers across the United States. This is very near and dear to both our hearts and our economic well-being in the future. And, Mr. Chairman, I took your title rather literally, so I want to take a step back when you referred to Broadband 101 and an overview of deployment. So if you'll give me a moment on this, let me proceed with my testimony. Before we talk about where we're going, let's take a moment to address where we've been. Not too long ago, communication was a landline phone attached to the kitchen wall. You were tethered to that location, you had one provider, and it provided two-way voice services. In 1993, mobile phone was commercially introduced to North America, and communications began to change. With the consumer adoption that followed well into the 90s, we found that we were no longer tethered, and there was a significant consumer interest and demand for mobile services. In 2007, the iPhone was introduced on the AT&T network, and it has revolutionized communications. AT&T invested in significant network enhancements to accommodate the new technology. Today, nearly two-thirds of Americans are smartphone owners and users, and among young adults, that number exceeds 85%. The trend is clear. Voice services are declining, and data is up. It is way up. In fact, since 2012, voice traffic has been less than 1% of our total network traffic, and it continues to decline. In contrast, since 2007, mobile data traffic on our network has increased an astounding 100,000%. It is projected that by 2019, mobile data will increase another 886%. And that phone on the kitchen wall, its network has undergone a major transformation as well, from delivering just two-way voice communications to delivering high-speed internet and high-definition video. The AT&T, just to give you a sense of size and volumes, the AT&T Global Backbone Network carries 56 petabytes of data traffic on an average business day. My same question, what is a petabyte? So to put it in perspective, I learned just 1 petabyte is more than 4 times all the data collected by the Library of Congress. So we're processing 56 petabytes on our network every single day, and those numbers are growing. Technology is supporting major transformations in social behavior as well, changing the way we communicate altogether. For many, text messages, email, and social media are the preferred means of keeping in touch. And if you have children, that is the only way they're willing to talk to you. Today's Americans send and receive text messages 5 times more often than they make a voice call every day. Modern IP-based technologies are on the rise, and we see consumers rapidly replacing their landline service with more modern options. In the 2020 timeframe, AT&T traditional residential landline customers will be less than 1% of California's entire population. From December of 2009 through June of 15 of this year, the number of AT&T rural landlines in California has dropped by almost 800,000. Now, we don't think those folks are communicating less. We think instead they're selecting other alternative technologies. That's a decrease, by the way, of 60% in the last 6 years. Far beyond the home phone, consumers today are connecting with VoIP, smartphone, tablets. You know the litany of products and services that are available. The implications for our wireless network is significant. 80% of smartphone owners over the age of 50 and 97% under the age of 30 use their mobile device for access to the internet. It's clear that IP technologies have been embraced by consumers and are integrated into our daily life. But I'd like to also do one other thing, Mr. Chairman, and I think this may be near and dear to your constituency in your district, and that is touch on the issue of public safety and network resiliency. As you know, there have been a number of natural and man-made disasters in Northern California. When the wildfires of recent months devastated communities in Lake Calaveras and Amador counties, AT&T technicians were deployed to provide base camps with emergency connectivity, deploy wireless satellite solutions, and place wireless facilities on backup power generators. These efforts maintained communications for entire communities who were devastated by the fire, included services to firefighters, first responders, and public safety personnel when our landline infrastructure actually burned. Even at the height of the fires, our wireless coverage remained almost entirely unaffected. We also have an important relationship with first responders. We have a $600 million invested in our network disaster recovery program. AT&T has the largest and most advanced program in the nation. Our disaster recovery team includes a fleet of 95 technology recovery semi-trailers and 15 satellite mobile sites and emergency communication vehicles. We are also the first private sector company to receive certification under the Department of Homeland Security's Private Sector Preparedness Program. And this is important because what it suggests with this certification is we are ready and available in the moment of a crisis, in a moment of an emergency, to deploy resources to serve those communities and first responders. IP networks also empower proactive communications when disaster strikes and important updates need to be shared. If affected residents are not listening to the radio or watching television, there is an excellent chance they will have their smartphones on hand. Advanced emergency notifications, whether they're utilizing email, text, and phone alerts, keep these communities informed when it matters most. Our rural networks are becoming even stronger and more resilient. For example, last year in Mendocino County, when an oversized truck hit and severed an aerial fiber cable, AT&T crews responded immediately and worked around the clock to replace 2.5 miles of fiber optic cable. It took us 45 hours to complete the job. 911 call centers were not affected by this outage. To protect against such localized fiber cuts in the future, our network engineers redesigned the network in that part of the state so voice and data services could be rerouted along diverse pathways. A year later, when vandals severed our fiber cable in Ukiah, crews again worked through the night and restored impacted services the next morning. At the direction, in this incident, at the direction of 911 call centers within the impacted region, AT&T rerouted all incoming 911 calls to other call centers until all services were restored. Tampering with phone networks is a violation of federal and state law and is a serious act of vandalism. This is why AT&T is currently offering a $50,000 reward for information that leads to the arrest and conviction of those responsible. So let me go back to the broader question about impacts on California. Meeting consumer demands through aggressive wireless and broadband deployment, AT&T has made significant advances in investment, availability, and affordability. Carolyn spoke to the excellent investments that the cable industry makes in California. I have a shorter time span. From 2012 to 2014, AT&T has invested $7.4 billion in our wireless and wireline networks in California alone. I raise that not to get a pat on the back. I raise that issue because we are investing significant sums of money in the state of California to build and maintain broadband networks across all the technologies. Although landline telephone service was first offered over 100 years ago, it took nearly a century to reach coverage rates at 90%. By contrast, Internet access was first made widely available to the public in 1996. And by 2008, just 12 years later, we've reached penetration rates in California above 96%. And those numbers continue to grow. So our network investment has touched virtually every corner of this state. And in the same time frame I quoted, we have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in rural California. In the majority of California's rural counties, we now deliver wireless voice and data to over 85% of the population. And 7 in 10 rural Californians now have wireless broadband access at 10 megs per second or greater. That is the 4G LTE services that not only we offer, but other wireless carriers who are not here today also offer. From 2011 through 2014, we also have invested heavily in the wireline access for Internet, increasing dramatically the speeds. For example, one major investment, AT&T is the predominant infrastructure provider for the California Telehealth Network, which was mentioned earlier. The objective, obviously, of that network is to increase access to health care for individuals in need, and particularly individuals in rural communities. It was also mentioned earlier that AT&T has accepted CAF II funding to build additional broadband in California to both unserved and underserved communities. Many eligible rural areas will receive Internet at speeds equal or greater than 10 megs per second, which also ties back to the conversation we were having earlier about the 25 meg versus the 10 meg. The 25 meg from the FCC appears to be aspirational. The 10 meg is what the FCC chose for the Connect America Fund going forward. We are living in an information and data revolution. It is being driven by technology and consumer demand. Two elements that are difficult to measure and difficult to appreciate is the billions of dollars it takes to invest and build these networks and the time it takes to get those networks deployed. Our IP infrastructure is continually evolving to meet the consumer need for increased data, speed, and reliability. Let me say we appreciate the committee's interest. It is always our preference to work with the members of this committee and the government officials that have already testified, as well as the community groups, to continue to work towards solutions to being able to deploy more, better, faster. Thanks for hearing my testimony.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Before we move on, I just want to welcome Mr. Bloom from rural Santa Monica. Appreciate you being here. Happy if you have anything you'd like to, love to have you here. So,
I represent Topanga Canyon and the Santa Monica Mountains as well, so it's good to be here.
Thank you. Nice lead in. Mr. Carlson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve Carlson, California Government Affairs Council for CTIA. We are the trade association for not only the wireless carriers, but software and operating systems providers, the device manufacturers, and the ecosystem for the wireless industry. Want to build on some of the things that Mr. Devine said by sharing how the wireless industry has been a substantial contributor and will continue to be to provide Internet access to all Californians, particularly those who don't have it as yet. As Mr. Devine said, a lot of the stuff that you could only do at home, now you can do anywhere. 10% of the population accesses broadband only through wireless. It's their only connection. Fortunately, the capabilities go beyond smartphones. There are tablets of various sorts. So a lot of the things like applying for jobs and the other aspects that are so important to those of us who want to make sure that we have that access can be done outside the home, can be done almost anywhere. Out of 38 million people in California, 36.4 million wireless subscribers. Many people have more than one device. And as we all know intuitively, Californians in increasing numbers are cutting the cord because they find the ability to do the things they need to do are more than adequately handled by their wireless device. 45 million Americans use wireless as their primary means of Internet access. That's in the United States. Mobile providers serve 68% of all broadband users in California. As we talked earlier, in 2007, the iPhone revolutionized not only the industry but the world. And before then, there wasn't such thing as a mobile app. In 2014, the mobile app revenue nationally was $33.7 billion, and expected to almost double by 2018. Out of 752,000 mobile app-related jobs in the U.S., fully one-third of those are here in California. California is the virtual birthplace of the world's wireless industry, and many of the leading companies, and now the app industry, were and are born and bred here. Wireless has and is transforming our lives in many of the areas you've heard from previous speakers: agriculture, connected homes, connected cars, healthcare delivery, finance. And as Mr. Chow's committee is going to be talking about tomorrow, the Internet of, and I'm going to call it everything, not just things, the Internet of everything, and it runs on wireless. The benefit to the economy and consumers and public safety are obvious. Wireless communications are a key component of the nation's 911 system. Over 70% of all 911 calls are made on your wireless phones. In addition to just 911, not just 911, but in addition to 911 from the public safety access, we have a plan called Wireless Emergency Alerts with the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA, where natural disasters are then broadcast via text alert if there's a tsunami and if there's a fire, if there's other sort of natural disaster. As you heard some earlier speakers say, we are working on texting to 911 as another aspect to it, because I think people, right now kids text and they assume that that's going to be a mechanism to do that. We are also working on next generation 911 with Ms. Wong and the Public Safety Communications Office that will provide immense more information to be provided on an emergency call. Further, we are working with the Office of Emergency Services to marry wireless capabilities with the impending earthquake emergency warning system. So all of these things are happening, and all of these things benefit all Californians. For every $1 invested in wireless broadband, it yields $7 to $10 in gross domestic product. We estimate that cumulus wireless capital investment over the years, starting about in the mid-'90s, or something in excess of $430 billion in California, has probably got 12 to 15% of that. But new wireless infrastructure is necessary to answer this need for more and more bandwidth and to extend the benefits of wireless communications into as many communities and consumers as possible. I want to take this opportunity to thank the Chair and the Legislature and the Governor for supporting the passage and signing of AB 57 by Mr. Quirk this year, which hope and believe will streamline the local processes for building the wireless infrastructure needed to deliver the wireless services and access to broadband and the Internet that we want for all Californians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Mr. Crosby.
Chairman, members, thank you for inviting Frontier Communications to being here today. I need to take a step back and explain who Frontier Communications is to many of you. Some of you in the rural areas understand, others in Santa Monica may not know, although I've hiked the Topanga Canyon and the Santa Monica Mountains many times. So Frontier Communications is a national company. We're the fourth largest telecommunications company in the U.S. We operate in 28 states. We have a voice network, broadband. We supply carrier services. We supply services to residents and businesses. Up and down the ladder, we really provide services to every customer in the states where we provide service. We're a 100% U.S.-based company, so that means all of our workforce is in the U.S. And 13% of our workforce is military veterans and families. We have an initiative in our company to hire more men and women from the military as well as their spouses. So that's, for us, is a key point to keep in mind. In terms of our footprint in California, it's pretty small. We provide service in the northern part of the state all the way down to the Needles and Blythe areas, as well as Elk Grove and Patterson. We have approximately 100,000 customers in the state, and we've been in business, to keep this in mind, since 1935. Not as long as Ma Bell, but a long time, in different variations from water to gas to electricity and telecommunications. It's been brought up a few times about Frontier's potential acquisition of Verizon properties in the state, and due to the ongoing proceeding, I can't talk about anything related to that right now, but I'll continue to talk about Frontier and what we provide. So as a company, we are committed to broadband deployment. As was seen in this state as well as other states, We have taken broadband to new levels where many communities did not have broadband. We'll take a state like West Virginia, where broadband availability was at 67%. We brought it up to close to 90%. So for us, our ethos, the way we run our business is broadband is critically important. It helps supply the backbone to every carrier, wireless and other carriers too. In California, we provide, we have 95% availability of broadband, and nationally we're at 90%. We did accept Connect America Fund 1. We were the only carrier in California to do that, and we were the first carrier in California for Connect America Fund 2 to accept all the monies available, not just in California, but nationally. One other thing we try to do to promote economic development and adaptability for broadband and other things is we started a contest about a year and a half ago called America's Best Communities. And what that contest was to get communities between the populations of 9,500 to 80,000. And if you were a community of a population less than 9,500, you could partner with communities to get above that number. And the idea was to create economic development for broadband, for other areas. And the contest is moving along quite nicely. In fact, one community in Susanville is one of the 50 finalists. The purse at the end is for first prize is $3 million, second prize is $2 million, and third prize is $1 million. Along the way, the 50 communities have received $50,000 to help build out their plans even more. And next April, we, an independent panel of judges, will select 8 communities which will each receive $100,000 to continue to build out their plans for economic development, which also includes broadband deployment in those communities. One other piece that you should keep in mind in terms of Frontier is that we provide satellite broadband service. We've partnered with Dish, and this service helps to get some of the areas of the very rural areas that don't have broadband, but it provides a service to get people on the internet. It's been brought up, the subject of the California Advanced Services Fund, and we're big supporters of the fund. We've had 7 grants approved from the fund over the last 8 years, and most recently, a few months ago, we had our grant approved in the Petrolia area just outside Eureka, which is critical for us to fill some of the gaps that we see in rural America. And for us as a company, the true success is everyone should have broadband. There's no question about it. As all the panelists here and before us have said, it's critical to the future of economic development, for jobs, you name it. It's just very, very important. And finally, we think that the state should be, at 98% broadband availability. There's no question about it. We need to get to the right speeds and the right pricing. But it's critically important for this state to continue to compete across the U.S., to reach the speeds and to reach the accessibility. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Smith. Great. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. It's great to address so many who are really interested in what broadband is all about. My name is Kirby Smith. I hail from Ducor Telephone Company down south, 38 miles north of Bakersfield, a very, very small and rural town. And Ducor Telephone is one of the smallest of the 13 incumbent local exchange carriers represented by the California Communications Association. I'm a past chairman of the California Communications Association and directly represent today our current chairwoman, Rhonda Armstrong, from Sebastian, who's out of town on business and unable to be with us. I'd like to address 3 important aspects pertaining to broadband. First of all, CalComm members are focused on broadband deployment. We believe broadband deployment is the key infrastructure. It satisfies our customers and drives our local economies, all the more so in the more rural communities that we serve. As the Public Utilities Commission, the Federal Communications Commission, and other bodies, regulatory bodies, enhance or increase the broadband speeds, as Bill and others have alluded to today, it's important to keep up with that. And our companies, our CalCom member companies, are always there meeting the challenges, staying up, getting ahead. Our ILEC companies serve a landmass fully the size of the state of Maryland and actually bigger than 8 states. So we do have a very significant footprint, though in rural and scattered areas across the state. Currently, our member companies are investing about $35 million in communications infrastructure today during this year in the state of California. Not much compared to the $7 billion, but it's still substantial from our smaller company perspective. Primarily remote and rural. Our companies, there's your map of California, go up to the Oregon border, all the way down to the border with Mexico, all throughout the San Joaquin Valley, the foothill regions, all the way nearly to some of the highest mountaintops in the state of California. We have companies in greatly dispersed areas. In drought, mudslides, fires, our companies are there meeting the challenges. Very interesting, the recent fire in Amador and Calaveras counties, where many of those towns, the smaller towns, San Andreas, West Point, etc., were evacuated, including portions of Pine Grove. Volcano Telephone, one of our member companies, was busy maintaining the service, restoring the service for the limited outages that they suffered, and also serving those emergency fire crews with the vital communications many have already alluded to. That's a critical thing. One additional point on that is that in doing a great job and meeting the responsibilities, our companies maintain a completely distinct and separate powering system. PG&E in that fire was knocked out very severely, so we don't necessarily need to rely on the local power company to deploy communication services. That's an important distinction to mention. To CalCom, broadband means being connected. Our companies help connect our customers to the world. Broadband both enables and enriches people's lives. Secondly, next, let's address whether broadband support programs are actually working. I know that's kind of the genesis of this hearing. We believe strongly that the Public Utilities Commission, the FCC, and also the Rural Utilities Service are all working very well to deliver on the promises of the explosion of technological opportunity that broadband brings. Customers are getting connected, communities are being supported, and results are delivered daily. I think Ms. McPeak and others have referred to the CETF and the field poll. Those results were announced in June of 2015, and the adoption rates have been on the increase at a good pace. As we know, California offers several programs. I'll allude to 2, the CASF and the CHCFA. Ms. Sandoval has mentioned both of those. Each is under the purview of the CPUC. Also, the FCC has a federal support mechanism for high-cost rural areas. Now, the RUS, a federal agency under USDA, also offers grants and loan programs. And if I can diverge for a second, Chairman Wood, I'll try to address your question regarding why no success in California. I wrote a lot of grants in the USDA programs very successfully, Arizona, Oklahoma, and many other states. The particular characteristics of our California communities don't really fit too well to those grant programs. That is the bottom line. Secondly, a lot of the school superintendents and others that ought to be pushing are not active like they are in Oklahoma and Arizona, where there is great need. And I wrote successful grants in other states there. And thirdly, there's about a 10-to-1 ratio of dollars available to actual grant money awarded. So it's extremely competitive. So those are the 3 criteria to answer your question from earlier. So all these programs, the FCC, the CPUC, the RUS, and maybe some others, support and help to address the digital divide. Now, in order to qualify for the CASF, applicants must offer the 6x1.5 platform. CalCom member companies have been recipients of this successful program. At Ducor Telephone, we did recently apply for a new CASF grant funding. Secondly, CalCom RLEC companies are good stewards of the CHCFA. That's the California High Cost Fund A, which promotes higher transmission quality and more reliable voice networks, fully redundant. Specifically, the A Fund is designed to maintain lower and more affordable rates in the more high-cost rural areas. That's its prime mission. Customers have testified before the CPUC to the distinct advantages of this very successful program, whether that's up north in Siskiyou, in Volcanoes area, or some of the other places, but there has been testimony to its great success across the state. Now, our companies deploy multi-use networks. That's a key thing to keep in mind. It's not a voice network, it's not a broadband network, it's a single unified multi-use network. It delivers the highest quality voice services while also facilitating robust broadband access. Incremental investments, then, have also fully met the reliability standards while avoiding the pitfalls of falling behind technologically. The turnover rate and the cost of reinvestment is pretty high in telecom. You must keep up. You've heard about the broadband standards going from 4x1 to 10x1 and hypothetically to 25x3. You must keep up with that and anticipate and or be ahead of that. Calcom member companies also serve the wireless cellular networks by providing fiber optic transport and backhaul. Again, back to the multi-use network. Fiber is a key infrastructure and can support cellular and wireless just as well. With a higher level of fiber optic cable deployment, networks are much less prone to lightning damage, corrosion of copper cables, crosstalk. Anybody ever heard of those things recently? Kind of like polio. It's gone. It's not talked about. Crosstalk. What's that, Bill? So as Bill has said and others have said, we've really advanced the network, and it's all about keeping up and getting ahead. Beyond enhancing transmission, the CHCFA funding has been utilized to shorten the customer loops. That's the distance from the electronic point. That means greater access to advanced services as well. Network improvements also lead to lower operating costs, thus stretching the CHCFA dollars even further. The lower your cost of operation, the more you can do with the money available. Amongst Calcom member companies, our broadband coverage is about 95 to 98%. We have take rates in the 60 to 75% range. And one company, CVIN, serves 18 counties in the San Joaquin Valley with a 1,700-mile fiber network offering speeds of, get this, 50 megabytes to 10 gigabytes. It serves 65 school districts with over 300,000 students benefiting from its broadband service. Also, lots of hospitals and other anchor institutions across this vast network. The interesting part here is this is a great example of regional collaboration with partners. I know that's talked about a lot in broadband. You just don't operate in a vacuum. It's a great collaboration with partners. We believe we provide the lifeblood that powers the local economy, especially in rural areas where businesses struggle to survive. My company, Ducor, we've probably lost half of our business customers in the last 15 to 20 years. There's just not enough business to support in the rural areas. So we're important infrastructure to keep things going, basically. Finally, third point, broadband deployment equals significant community benefits. Very interesting story. The Volcano Telephone Company has a major observatory with a top-notch astronomer in there. They have a 50 megabyte circuit to that location, and the customer is very satisfied with it. This is in addition to their regular, very robust coverage throughout their area. Another company, Ponderosa Telephone, just several years ago provided service to a brand new high school in an area. That's very rare, particularly in a small town of O'Neill's, that you'd have a brand new high school formed. So they immediately deployed a 12 megabit network. The school superintendent was just amazed at the great advantages his students now had. They effectively leapfrogged maybe other places. So they had great advantages despite the fact that they're out in the boonies. Siskiyou Telephone serves tribal lands, that's way up north, and I think some of those locations were referred to earlier, to ensure connectivity for the benefit of its tribal members. Next Generation 911, I think someone mentioned that. This will facilitate more immediate disaster responsiveness and improve public safety. CalCom members such as the Sierra Telephone are at the forefront of this new technology at its PSAPs, the 911 call centers. Sierra Telephone has at least 2 large regional calling centers for 911, so they're actively involved in that. And additionally, California is backed, or CalCom is backed by, in the back of your brochure, over 100 additional vendors, consultants, manufacturers that are involved in meeting the needs of broadband. So we have a lot of people and doing a lot. In part, the mission of CalCom is to foster industry excellence, work with providers and manufacturers to accelerate broadband deployment and adoption. Why? To empower people, to empower everybody in California. That's what it's about. So what has broadband become? Recently, some of us who are in on this on a daily basis have been stunned, and I mean the word stunned, to see what people say. What feedback do you get? I'm not a big believer in surveys. I don't answer survey calls myself, but we undertook one as part of our process in applying for funding. 151 customers, way high up in the Sierras, 6,400-foot elevation south of Mount Whitney. This place is so remote and isolated, there is no electricity, there's no commercial power anywhere, none. Now, the fascinating thing is to understand what broadband can mean. Here's the results. We did the survey and found that the local populace is very used to the yesterday isolation or the lack of electricity. The survey results said 2% were worried about electricity, yet 65% were worried and involved and wanted enhanced, better communications in various, they want wireless, they want wireline, they want internet, they want faster speeds, all of the things that we've talked about all day long. This is what they want. The question was not, do you want broadband? The question was, what was the need for the community? The answer is broadband is the need for the community, not electricity. May we focus on the key fact that it is broadband that connects people to people and people to community. Thank you.
Thank you.